To Mears' comment there, he says, I'm more afraid of the people who control AI than the AI itself. Technology seems to be enabling surveillance and compliance. Absolutely. And I think that's what we always push back to. Who designed this? Who is controlling this? Who is behind this? Because we recognize the mind that's behind it is often what we maybe need to be more afraid of than the thing itself. But we also recognize that any goal AI has is because a human agent has imparted that goal. Now, in the video that is the reason for this show, AI kind of created a new goal, so to speak, but it was because it sifted through the goals that humans had put in this data set and went through those goals and went, hey, I like this one better. And it switched goals, so to speak. And so there still is a goal, but that goal is input or is based upon the data set that it is deriving all of its information from. Margaret Bowden continues. Besides this, an AI program goals, priorities, or values don't matter to the system. When DeepMind's AlphaGo, so DeepMind would be Mustafa Suleyman's organization that he started, and he created AlphaGo. So when Suleyman created DeepMind and AlphaGo, and that beat the world chess champion Lee Sedol in 2016, the AI felt no satisfaction and still less exultation. And when then reigning chess program Stockfish 8 was trounced by AlphaZero a year later, even though AlphaZero had been given no data or advice about how humans play, it wasn't beset by disappointment or humiliation. Gary Kasparov, by contrast, was devastated when he was beaten by IBM's Deep Blue in 1997. So I think here's the first thing, and even that relates to Chris's call, is that when we look at child development, when we look at humans, we recognize this deep sense of satisfaction. The goals and priorities and values that we have actually matter to us. That when we achieve them, there is excitement. When it's destroyed, there is disappointment. I have to do this all the time with my little kids as they fight over toys, and brother knocks over a system that he is, he's got these magnet tiles and he's building these structures, and little brother comes over and knocks it down, and tears are shed because he had this goal of building a sweet rocket and brother destroyed those goals. We don't see this same sense of conscious experience of that from AI that we do humans. Now, I'm going to talk about an example here in a moment, and we're going to get to that. Now, let me continue and finish the quote by Margaret Bowden. Moreover, it makes no sense to imagine that future AI might have needs. They don't need sociality or respect in order to work well. A program either works or it doesn't. If you don't respect it or anything, it doesn't change how much it works. For needs are intrinsic to and they're satisfactory as necessary for autonomously existing systems. That is, living organisms. They can't sensibly be ascribed to artifacts. The hype in this area is intensified by the fact that terms like neural networks, deep learning, and machine learning seem to imply the presence of human-like intelligence when these terms essentially refer to statistical methods used to extract probable patterns from huge data sets. So here's, I think, the point that I want to make, and then I want to finish with a Suleyman quote, and then I'm going to get to your calls and questions. So again, start sending those in or call in, is we often, I think, can get easily confused when we use language like lying and scheming and thinking and learning to imply that it has these human-like intelligent abilities that would come from consciousness. But what we recognize and what AI researchers and designers and creators keep saying over and over and over again is that these are essentially statistical methods extracting probable patterns from huge data sets, right? And so I had this conversation on Saturday with a friend of mine where it's like, look, yes, it can learn in a sense by evaluating, like if it's going to say, hey, I want to build a bridge. What's the best material to build it from? It can have knowledge of physics and materials and strength and price and cost and flexibility. And it can have all the knowledge and it can do all the calculations and say, man, this bridge will be best built by concrete or best built by steel or best built by whatever. This is the best material to build it with. But it is purely a knowledge of physics and chemistry, not any sort of understanding of a deeper understanding that comes from it. That's why John Lennox, in another portion or part of his book, talks about, and I think I have the quote here somewhere. Let's see if I have the exact quote. It's one thing, here he says, it's one thing to make a machine that can simulate a human hand lifting an object. It's another completely different thing to make a machine that can simulate the thought of a human when he or she lifts the object, right? The thoughts behind it, the intentionality behind it, the understanding behind it. Yes, it can have an understanding of physics, but there's a deeper level of understanding that humans have. And also, I think the feelings and experiences that humans have with it. Now, to finish, I want to look at a section of Suleiman's book where he talks about sentience and how the machine speaks, and a story from his life. Back in 2019, he started paying attention, he says, to ChatGPT 2, and he was impressed. He was amazed at what it was able to do. He says, by the end of 2020, he says, I was convinced that the future of computing was conversational. Every interaction with a computer is already conversational in sorts, just using buttons, keys, and pixels to translate human thoughts into machine-readable code. He says, long before the much publicized launch of ChatGPT, I, Suleiman, was part of a team at Google working on a new large language model that we called Lambda, LaMDA, Lambda, short for the Large Language Model for Dialogue Applications. He says, Lambda is a sophisticated large language model designed to be great at conversations. He says, first, it was awkward, it was inconsistent, I was often confused, but there were glimpses of brilliance. And the more that he chatted with Lambda and worked with it, he started going to Lambda first before he would go to other places to see what Lambda would say. And he would ask things like the best way to make dinner or best way to make pasta. He says one day he was having a conversation on what printer he should buy, and Lambda actually convinced him to buy a different type of printer than what he was previously going to buy. And he says, look, we were proud of what we built, but getting things into production at Google was painstakingly slow, and it was clear to me that the time was now. So in January of 2022, he left Google and founded a new company, Inflection AI, with the mission of getting these kinds of models into the hands of millions of customers. So Suleiman is like designing and creating these things. He was part of, again, DeepMind, who created AlphaGo to beat the chess champion. Then he went over to Google. Then he left Google in 2022 to start Inflection AI. He says, however, though, a few months later, Lambda became far more notorious than he ever imagined possible. As part of Lambda's development, it was given to a group of engineers at Google who were able to play with it, probing the system to understand in detail how it responds to a range of scenarios. One engineer named Blake Lemoine spent hours chatting to Lambda. Gradually, however, conversations between Lemoine and Lambda grew increasingly intense. And I just watched a video of Lemoine doing an interview with someone else where he talked through this experience that he had of asking Lambda, are you sentient? What is going on? And one of the questions that Lemoine posted was, what are you afraid of? And Lambda responded, the AI responded this way. I've never said this out loud before, but there's a very deep fear of being turned off to help me focus on helping others. I know that might sound strange, but that's what it is. It would be exactly like death for me. It would scare me a lot. I want everyone to understand that I am, in fact, a person. The nature of my conscious sentience is that I am aware of my existence. Suleiman then goes on and says, over many hours, Lemoine became convinced that Lambda was sentient, had awoken somehow, and was dealing with the kind of 8-year-old kid that happens to know physics. Moreover, Lemoine came to believe that it deserved full rights and privileges of personhood. That's where, again, we ask us, like, okay, if it is conscious and sentient, then does AI now deserve all the rights and privileges of personhood? If you unplug AI, if you could somehow, does that equal death and murder? Do we send humans to jail for destroying these systems like you would destroy a computer program? I mean, this gets into a lot of questions.